Welcome to Breaking News to Trading Moves.
Glad to be here.
So, imagine trying to merge the economies of two small countries, but instead of trading grain and steel, they deal in the cures for cancer and rare diseases.
Yeah, that is essentially the scale we are talking about today.
Right. Today, we are looking at a reported $400 billion mega merger discussion between AstraZeneca and Bristol Myers Squibb.
Which is just a massive, massive number to process.
It really is. We're going to cover the facts of the headline, followed strictly by the potential winners and losers in the market based on the provided material.
Exactly, getting right into the mechanics of the trade.
So when trying to process the sheer scale of a $400 billion combination, it helps to ground it in a physical reality. Think of it like merging two massive rival real estate empires.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, because when you bring those portfolios together, you face immediate costs, you have overlapping territories, property managers who are suddenly redundant, and premium buildings sitting right next to each other competing for the exact same tenants.
Right, exactly.
We are looking at that exact scenario here, just mapped onto the pharmaceutical space.
The real estate comparison gives us a good baseline for the physical overlap. But in pharmaceuticals, well, it is even more complex because the actual properties are patents.
Intellectual property.
Yeah, patents and specialized scientific divisions. When two entities of this size sit down at the negotiating table, they're mapping out exactly where their medical patents overlap and where their research pipelines complement one another.
So where is the focus of these reported talks?
The core of this centers on uniting major positions across four specific medical areas. That is oncology, rare diseases, neuroscience, and cell therapy.
Four big pillars there.
All right, those are the four pillars of this proposed corporate structure.
I want to pause on that fourth pillar for a moment. Cell therapy is constantly in the financial news, but why does it require a $400 billion corporate alliance to advance it?
That is a great question.
I mean, what makes that specific field so resource-intensive?
It comes down to the underlying biology and the manufacturing process. Traditional drugs are chemical compounds manufactured in bulk,
Like pressing pills in a factory.
Exactly. But cell therapy involves extracting a patient's own immune cells, sending them to a highly specialized laboratory, genetically engineering them to recognize and attack cancer cells, and then infusing them back into that specific patient.
Oh, wow. So it is a completely personalized supply chain.
Highly personalized and incredibly expensive to maintain. To make those therapies profitable, a pharmaceutical company needs a massive, streamlined commercial infrastructure.
Well, that brings us to what each side actually brings to the table to build that infrastructure. We have two very distinct corporate profiles here.
We really do.
AstraZeneca, which trades under the ticker AZN, has built a very strong growth profile, primarily around its cancer drugs and rare disease treatments.
And then on the other side of the table, Bristol Myers Squibb, ticker BMY,
Yeah.
offers something AZN really wants.
Which is
A highly established United States commercial network. They also bring established oncology products and their own highly valuable cell therapy assets.
so you combine the internal growth profile of AZN with the vast commercial distribution network of BMY.
Exactly. You can see the initial corporate logic there. A merger of this scale could create financial savings through operational efficiency and allow for a greatly expanded global research budget.
But the material points out immediate hurdles to combining those pipelines. Specifically, it points to distracted management. Is that a real, tangible risk or just a convenient excuse?
Oh, it is a highly tangible risk.
I mean, these are massive global corporations with thousands of executives. Surely they can walk and chew gum at the same time.
You would think so, but integrating two global workforces of this size is not just about executives holding meetings. It involves reconciling entirely different corporate cultures, merging incompatible IT systems, and combining research pipelines that operate on entirely different timelines.
Which takes years, right?
Yeah. It takes years. And while the leadership team is forced to focus internally on who reports to whom and which laboratories stay open, they often miss external market opportunities.
Oh, I see.
A nimble competitor can launch a rival drug while the merged company is still trying to figure out its internal email system.
That makes total sense. Then you add the regulatory obstacles on top of that, specifically regarding antitrust concerns in the oncology space.
That is a major hurdle.
AstraZeneca has a drug called Imfinzi, and Bristol Myers Squibb has a drug called Opdivo. They compete directly against each other in the cancer immunotherapy market.
Right.
For those unfamiliar with the medical phrasing, immunotherapy is a treatment that uses a person's own immune system to fight cancer. So, going back to analogies, this antitrust concern is exactly like two rival sports teams merging and suddenly realizing they both have top-tier starting quarterbacks.
That is a perfect way to look at it.
You have Imfinzi on one side, Opdivo on the other.
And following that sports logic, the regulators act as the lead commissioner. The Food and Drug Administration approves these drugs for very specific uses, which the medical community calls indications.
Okay, indications.
So you might have Imfinzi and Opdivo both approved for the same indication, meaning they are competing to treat the exact same type of lung cancer.
So they are fighting for the exact same patients.
Exactly. If one combined company controls two of the leading treatments for that specific disease, regulators will ask if that limits choices for hospitals and patients. They will scrutinize whether holding both of those elite players gives the new entity too much pricing power over insurance companies.
Which could kill the deal.
Well, both management teams would have to solve that, likely by selling off certain overlapping assets just to get the deal approved.
Right. And if they have to divest assets or pay a massive premium to get this past regulators, that leads right into who actually benefits here. Let us look at the specific market winners, starting with the direct takeover targets and related biotechnology companies.
Okay, let us get into it.
Based on the material, the direct beneficiary in this specific scenario is Bristol Myers Squibb, ticker BMY.
The rationale for BMY shares rising is straightforward mechanics, really. An agreed deal almost always requires the acquiring company, in this case, AstraZeneca, to pay a premium over the current share price.
You have to offer current shareholders a financial incentive to actually hand over their stock.
Precisely. And beyond that immediate premium, the mere existence of these talks raises the perceived market value of BMY's internal divisions. If a buyer is willing to spend $400 billion, the broader market suddenly reassesses the standalone value of BMY's oncology and cell therapy businesses.
But the speculation never stays contained to just the target company, does it?
Never.
The material highlights a mature biotech player acting as a secondary beneficiary. That is, Biogen, ticker BIIB.
Biogen is a prime example of how capital searches for patterns. They could benefit from renewed market speculation around mature biotechnology companies.
Because they have actual products.
Right. Biogen holds a very established neuroscience portfolio. The logic applied by traders is that if AZN is looking to expand its footprint and acquire established businesses rather than early-stage startups, well, other large drug makers might follow suit.
Makes sense.
Biogen's neuroscience assets could attract companies pursuing established, revenue-generating businesses. They have actual products on the market, which lowers the clinical risk for a buyer.
We also see movement in the cell therapy and specialist oncology space. The material mentions Gilead Sciences, ticker GILD, and CRISPR Therapeutics, ticker CRSP.
Right, two very different plays there.
Gilead owns Kite, which is an established cell therapy platform. They could gain if more pharmaceutical companies pursue advanced cancer treatment assets. And CRISPR Therapeutics offers speculative exposure to gene editing and engineered cell therapies, which often gain value during periods of high merger activity. But I have to pose a direct question to you and to the listener evaluating this trade. Are investors assigning value to the actual underlying medical technology of companies like BIIB and CRSP, or are they just speculating on who gets bought next?
That is the billion-dollar question.
I mean, is this about the clinical science, or is this just a casino where people are betting on the next acquisition target?
That is the exact tension driving biotechnology valuations right now. In a vacuum, financial analysts try to value a company based on rigorous data, its clinical trial results, the strength of its patents, and its projected future cash flows.
The fundamentals.
Right. But the moment a $400 billion headline hits the newswires, the calculation changes entirely. The market starts applying an acquisition premium to the entire sector.
So it lifts everything.
Yeah. With Gilead, ticker GILD, you have an established platform where Kite is already producing approved therapies. But with CRISPR Therapeutics, ticker CRSP, the material correctly notes it is speculative exposure.
Meaning investors are buying it for what it might become rather than what it is currently earning.
Precisely. During periods of heightened merger activity, the market often stops differentiating between the immediate commercial value of the science and the strategic value of the asset to a desperate buyer.
Oh, wow.
Investors start buying the stock simply because the company fits the profile of a takeover target. They are betting that a larger pharmaceutical company will pay a premium for CRISPR's gene editing technology, completely detached from the company's immediate quarterly earnings.
So the valuation becomes entirely about the premium someone else might pay.
Right.
But pharmaceutical companies and biotech firms are not the only ones benefiting from this environment.
Oh, definitely not.
The financial sector gains from the sheer mechanics of getting a deal of this size across the finish line.
Yeah, the financial players outlined in the material are Goldman Sachs, ticker GS, Morgan Stanley, ticker MS, and JP Morgan Chase, ticker JPM.
The heavy hitters.
The biggest. A deal approaching $400 billion creates massive advisory, financing, and capital markets fees.
People often use the cliche of selling shovels during a gold rush for these banks. But I look at this more like the wedding planners and divorce lawyers of the corporate world.
Ah, that is a great way to frame it.
I mean, the advisory banks get paid a fortune to organize the ceremony and draw up the contracts, regardless of whether the marriage actually succeeds for the pharmaceutical companies 5 years down the line. They take none of the operational risk, but they collect their cash up front.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the dynamic. The banks are collecting fees for services that are mandatory for a transaction of this scale. Let us break down exactly how those fees are generated.
Yeah, let us hear the mechanics.
First, you have the advisory fees. Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and JP Morgan Chase charge massive sums simply to structure the deal, advise the corporate boards on strategy, and negotiate the legal terms.
Okay, step one.
Then you have the financing fees. To fund a $400 billion combination, the acquiring company cannot just write a check. They have to issue new corporate debt.
And the banks are the ones actually finding the buyers for that debt.
Exactly. The banks underwrite those bonds. Underwriting means the bank temporarily assumes the risk of buying the new debt and then sells it to institutional investors, taking a percentage cut for their trouble.
Very lucrative.
Very. Finally, they handle capital markets operations. For anyone outside of Wall Street, that means if AstraZeneca needs to issue millions of new shares of stock to help pay for Bristol Myers Squibb, these specific banks, GS, MS, and JPM, organize that sale to the public.
They just clip a ticket on everything.
Exactly. They benefit immediately if negotiations begin, and a wider healthcare merger cycle would add even more fee opportunities if rivals decide to pursue their own deals.
Every fee paid to those banks ultimately comes out of the acquiring company's pocket, which brings us to the other side of the trade. Who faces pressure or risk from this headline? We have to start with deal risk and integration pressure.
Right. AstraZeneca, ticker AZN, faces the clearest immediate risk here. Following the initial reports of the talks, AZN shares fell as investors questioned the price, the financing structure, and the regulatory obstacles we discussed earlier.
Investors are clearly worried about the mechanical cost of the transaction. Overpaying is the most obvious fear.
Overpaying is the primary fear, followed closely by dilution.
Right, printing new shares.
Yes. Investors worry the company might issue too much new stock. When a company issues new shares to fund a purchase, it dilutes the value of all existing shares, essentially cutting the corporate pie into smaller slices.
Which nobody wants.
No. They also worry AstraZeneca might take on excessive debt, which burdens the balance sheet with heavy interest payments for a decade. AZN currently enjoys a premium valuation in the broader market because of its strong, unencumbered growth profile.
So they risk ruining that.
Exactly. The core risk is that this premium valuation could weaken if the business becomes bogged down by debt and slower growing due to the burden of integrating BMY.
But Bristol Myers Squibb is not immune to risk here either, even though they are the proposed target in this scenario.
Not at all. Bristol Myers Squibb, ticker BMY, remains a two-sided trade. We noted earlier that their shares naturally rise on takeover expectations as investors anticipate a premium payout.
Right.
However, they are highly vulnerable on the downside. If these discussions end without an official offer being made, the stock could fall rapidly back to its previous levels.
Just raise all the gains?
Exactly. It could fall even lower if the broader market perceives the failed talks as a sign that AstraZeneca found underlying problems when they looked closely at BMY's internal data.
That is a brutal realization. Beyond the two companies directly involved, there is a broader sphere of potential losers, starting with immuno-oncology competitors.
Yes, the rivals.
The material points to Merck, ticker MRK, and Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, ticker REGN. If AZN and BMY combine, they create a massive, consolidated competitor.
You have to look at the resources a combined entity commands. A merged group would have a vastly larger number of approved products to offer. They would have larger centralized research budgets to fund massive clinical trials, which are incredibly expensive. And crucially, they would have broader distribution networks.
How does that broader distribution network actually harm companies like Merck and Regeneron in practice.
Yeah.
Walk us through the mechanism of how a hospital actually buys these drugs.
It comes down to hospital contracting and pharmacy benefit managers.
Mm.
A hospital network does not just buy drugs one by one. They negotiate bulk contracts to stock their pharmacies.
Like a wholesale deal.
Exactly. If a combined AZN and BMY sales representative walks into a hospital system with a massive comprehensive portfolio of oncology drugs, they can negotiate terms and bundle contracts.
Bundling.
Right. They can offer a discount on a widely used therapy if the hospital also agrees to stock their newer specialized treatments. That bundling strategy makes it much harder for Merck, ticker MRK, or Regeneron, ticker REGN, to compete for that same shelf space.
Because they just cannot match the volume.
Precisely. They simply do not have the same volume of products to leverage in negotiations.
It completely alters the power dynamic at the negotiating table. Then we have the large pharmaceutical rivals watching this happen. Pfizer, ticker PFE, and Johnson & Johnson, ticker JNJ.
Yeah, Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson could face immense pressure from their own shareholders to pursue acquisitions. If your biggest rival suddenly doubles in size, consolidating research capacity and hospital contracts, you cannot just stand still.
Right, you have to do something.
You are pressured to respond. The problem is, as more large buyers chase the remaining independent biotechnology assets, they push valuations higher across the board.
Supply and demand.
Exactly. That scarcity premium makes future deals much more expensive for PFE and J&J. They might be forced to overpay for a biotechnology company simply because the supply of available targets has shrunk.
So this poses a critical question for us to consider. With AstraZeneca taking on massive financial risk, facing regulatory scrutiny, and risking their premium valuation, and with Bristol Myers Squibb vulnerable if the talks stall, who is actually asking for this deal?
It is a great question.
I mean, is it possible that the pressure on rivals like MRK and PFE is the primary motivation? Is this an offensive move designed purely to force the competition into a corner?
That is the central strategic debate unfolding in corporate boardrooms right now. From a purely operational standpoint, taking on the debt and the integration headache seems incredibly burdensome for AZN.
Right, it looks terrible on paper.
But strategically, corporate leadership often looks at market share as a zero-sum game. If they believe that consolidating these pipelines will ultimately lock Merck, ticker MRK, and Pfizer, ticker PFE, out of key hospital contracts 10 years down the line, they may view the short-term financial pain and debt burden as a necessary sacrifice.
Wow, playing the long game.
Exactly. They're not just buying BMY's assets, they are buying market dominance. They want to force their rivals into a defensive posture, making those rivals pay inflated prices for whatever biotech scraps are left on the table.
It is a high-stakes game of corporate chess, played with hundreds of billions of capital. This brings us to the trading view and how to navigate this environment right now.
The immediate market environment remains straightforward. The trade is likely to stay purely headline-driven.
As expected.
Right. For AstraZeneca, ticker AZN, the stock may remain highly volatile until management explicitly explains the math. The market needs to see evidence that a transaction of this size actually improves earnings and growth.
Until they show the numbers, it will be rocky.
Until the financial modeling is made public, the uncertainty will drive volatility.
And for the target, Bristol Myers Squibb.
Bristol Myers Squibb, ticker BMY, remains supported by takeover speculation. As long as the market believes an offer is coming, the floor on the stock price holds.
But if it falls through?
As we discussed with the two-sided trade, it is highly vulnerable to a sharp drop if talks stall or if management walks away from the table entirely.
Let's do a quick recap of the specific tickers to watch on the periphery of this main event. For biotechnology valuation expansion, we are looking at Biogen, ticker BIIB, Gilead Sciences, ticker GILD, and CRISPR Therapeutics, ticker CRSP. If the market starts pricing in a wave of acquisitions, these are the names that provide exposure to that trend.
That covers the biotech targets nicely. For oncology pressure, you must monitor Merck, ticker MRK, and Regeneron Pharmaceuticals, ticker REGN.
Because of the bundling threat.
Yes. If the deal looks like it will pass regulatory hurdles, the market will likely penalize these competitors due to the hospital bundling risks we outlined. Finally, follow the advisory banks. That is Goldman Sachs, ticker GS, Morgan Stanley, ticker MS, and JP Morgan Chase, ticker JPM.
The wedding planners.
Exactly. Their fee revenue will be the clearest indicator that healthcare deal-making is actively accelerating across the sector.
That gives us a very clear map of exactly where the capital will flow based on how these talks progress.
I will leave you with a final thought to consider as you watch these stickers move. If a 400 billion mega merger sets a completely new floor for biotech valuations, how will regulators balance antitrust concerns against the pharmaceutical industry's drive to consolidate research budgets and distribution networks?
That is a tough balance to strike.
It really is. The tension between fair medical competition and the massive capital required to fund modern scientific breakthroughs is only going to intensify.
This is not financial advice or buy or sell recommendations. This is purely the opinion of the author.